So to emboss and shape the paper, you want it to be just barely damp. And if you live somewhere that's fairly humid, you may not even need to do this. If your paper always kind of has a dampness to it, it's probably enough that you can work with it as it is. I live in the desert, so my paper is dry, dry, dry. So what I do, and this is something that Reinhard taught me to get the right consistency, is don't actually spray on the paper. You really just need it, just a hint of dampness. So I actually take paper towels and spray it. And I have this little spray bottle. I'm using bottled water. I don't know if it really matters, but I try to keep it as acid-free archival as I can, and that seems like a simple thing to do. So I wet down the paper towel. And then I take the pieces that I'm going to shape and I just lay them in between the paper towel. Had some water on my finger, but that won't really matter. Just kind of could have done this in stages, but. And you just let it sit just for a few minutes, probably even 5 minutes. And the paper towel also keeps it damp while you work on it one piece at a time. And I'll just go back through and spray the top layer a little bit more so the wetness sits in it. I used to try to directly spray the paper and just directly wet it, and that just, it's too wet. You don't want it wet. You want it just past being dry, if that makes sense. It's a little tricky to tell if it's actually damp enough or too damp. When I go in with the tools, you can tell if it's too damp because it'll kind of skitter across it. But what I do when I emboss is I go from big areas to small areas. And with these pant legs, I'm going to want some big folds in there. And those are easy to just kind of do manually. And one thing that's a big tool, and if you look at it, it's quite worn here, is actually using the side of your table to shape the paper. And I almost always start with this just to give it a little basic area. So what I'm doing is I'm rounding it to get kind of that sense of the roundness of the leg. And then I'm going to go in just with my fingers even, and this is where you sometimes get these smaller tools where I'm not being really fine, but I'm just trying to shape the folds a little bit. I have some indications here from where I did the transparent ink. Then I also have some lines that I did from the initial drawing. It gets a little tricky though, because when you're working with the ink, it's hard to connect it up because the paper is opaque, and so some of it becomes very natural forming too, which is why we'll probably go back in and add some more local color once the actual folds are in place. So I can see that I'm going to have to go back in and do a sharper line here, but I'm just manipulating the paper in big areas right now to get these kind of big folds of the fabric. Since this is the paper I'm working on and I know it's the right consistency, I'm going to keep doing the other embossing techniques because I want to keep my other papers at kind of that wetness stage. So this is where you have a couple of choices on how you're going to emboss it. I'm going to use my special tools, but you could also play with different effects and different techniques based on the tools that you have in hand. What is really important is what you use to emboss it against. This is just an extra piece of foam core because I use it as a backing for all my pieces and they're different sizes. I tend to end up with random bits. This is probably about as small as you want to go. Sometimes I'll go smaller. When I was with Reinhard, we tried several other things that I had to emboss against that were either too soft or too hard. This is just the right consistency, and since I have it, it's perfect. I then use it for, once it's broken down too much, then I'll use it for adding the layers and building it up with the paper sculpture. And then again, because it's acid free, I feel like I'm making sure that my whole process is very archival. This is obviously a pristine sheet. I'll probably have an after picture down the road. But I know right off the bat I want to get this sharp crease. And when I'm doing the embossing, I work from the inside out, and I'm going to go through and turn basically all my edges, but I want to leave that for the last. So this is kind of like, there's a technique with metal embossing called repoussé, which is, I guess, French for repushing basically. And you're going to want to work on both sides of the paper. I'll work on the front side, and then, I don't know, maybe I won't. And the other thing to remember too is your fingernails. My fingernails are so bad because I've been inking. They're black and they're short, but your fingernails can actually be an excellent embossing tool also. So that's getting more of that crease that I want there. And then I'm going to go in, because I've got these inked areas already, I want to really kind of hit those areas where I've gone in. Because it's a fold, I don't need to go back from the other side as much. I don't want it to be as sharp. In some things, you would go back from the other side. And I'm also getting a shine to it if it shows up in the video. And once it's totally dry, I'll tell you how to get rid of that. It was something I kind of stumbled on by accident on my own. And then I'm going to go back all along the edges now. And I'm just creasing it because what I want to get is I want to get a nice bend all along the edges of it. And there's different ways you can do it. You can roll it over a little, this is just like a tool that comes with a nail kit, I think, for pushing your cuticles down. You can also use these paper embossing tools that I have, and I've noticed that you can get these same tools for a lot of different applications, clay, painting, dot painting. So you just want to go along the edge and you're basically just curling it down. What I also find these are really useful is once I've curled it, then I go and I kind of come at it from this side and just let it kind of roll along, and it emphasizes my curled down edges a little bit more. So I'll just finish embossing this piece, and I'll let the video run, but I'll probably speed it up when I play it, so I'll stop talking now and I'll just finish the embossing. And I just turned off the light because sometimes you really need a directional light to kind of see where the folds are. So you can see how I've given a lot of shape to this paper now, and I'll let it dry. And it's actually quite stiff. I think people are always surprised with how strong paper sculpture is. And you can definitely see the shine there. And we're going to go back in when it's totally dry and we'll get rid of the shine.